Life is a roller coaster, and what matters most is consistency. And the thing I care about most within my teams is that behavioral change under pressure. Are you consistent when it's going well or when it's not going well, and how the things that you think about and the things that you say and your actions are things that you ultimately control. I spent 15 years doing expeditions to well over 100 countries, and I was always trying to do with my amazing teams first and fastest. So the whole point of all the expeditions I did was trying to create a different future. It was always about taking what had gone before and trying to imagine a different way of doing it. So I never thought I was the best cyclist. It was always about how you build a team to do things fundamentally differently. So the big difference, I think, between management and leadership, well, there's plenty of good people who technically know how to do the job, but leadership is that ability to actually imagine and then build a team around a different future. So I did that as an athlete and broadcast projects for 15 years. I now do it as an impact investor. I've got 23 companies in my portfolio, and it's exactly the same thing. How do you have the leadership and the quiet confidence to imagine a different way of doing things and then resource that properly? And it's the same thing whether you're riding a bike, making a film, or scaling a business. Motivation is clearly at the heart of everything we do in terms of productivity, prioritization. But I think you need to always remember that humans are human, we're not robots, and you got to keep kindness at the heart of high performance. So this nonsense that you hear about, you've always got to do better, and positive mindset and other often used phrases, they miss the important fact that we have good days, good hours, bad hours. Life is a roller coaster, and what matters most is consistency. And the thing I care about most within my teams is that behavioral change under pressure. Are you consistent when it's going well or when it's not going well, and how the things that you think about and the things that you say and your actions are things that you ultimately control. So yes, I value people who have technical skill sets, but the thing I talk about a lot with my teams is actually how do you be consistent, and how do you give quiet confidence to those around you, because your behaviors and your words really matter. They percolate, and we all cast a shadow around us in terms of how what you say and how you're feeling influences other people's behaviors. So that simple idea around it's just got to be around being positive and motivated, I think misses the important fact in the real world that actually life is complicated. There's a whole load of stuff which is outside of your control. And what I always think about myself and with the teams that I work in is, how do you put people back in the seat where they've got a level of agency, like they feel like they can control the world around them, and actually thinking when you're in high pressure situations, is this something that's happening by me? I've made that choice to put myself into a difficult place, or is this something that's happening to me and I feel a bit out of control? And I think it's a really interesting framework to think about how you stay relevant to challenges, as opposed to this ridiculous nonsense that you always need to be happy and motivated. Because guess what? In the real world, tough stuff is tough, and it's really good to call it what it is and realize that you got to have grit, you've got to have resolve, but it comes with a wry smile. Risk is a difficult word for people because risk is often in the eyes of the beholder. So the way I think about risk is usually using the word exposure as opposed to risk, because exposure is the simple concept of how likely is something to go wrong, and if it does go wrong, how serious are the consequences. So, I've done lots of high altitude mountaineering in my life, and you can be walking along a ridge line which is very safe, but if you fall, it's 3,000 feet and you're going to die. Or you can be walking along another ridge line which is very, very technical and difficult. You're very likely to fall, but if you fall, you're going to drop 2 meters and twist your ankle, but no worse. So the exposure question on those two scenarios, a safe ridge, an easy ridge, a dangerous ridge, and therefore if it goes wrong, how far you fall and what happens, is a very useful way of thinking about almost any situation you find yourself in life. So I make financial decisions about investment every single day and team building and what the rest of it. And I'm never really thinking, is it safe or dangerous? Because that's such a clumsy metric. I can talk about climbing the world's highest volcano, or rowing the Atlantic, or cycling around the world, or scaling a business. And I'll have a very different view on the risk because I've done this stuff my entire adult life. Whereas somebody who's a brain surgeon who's done that for 25 years will have a very different view on the risks they're taking than if I was to try and do what they do. I think risk is very much in the eyes of the beholder because it's your lived experience to be able to analyze that situation differently. So when people say to me, oh, you must be an absolute adrenaline junkie and a risk taker, I'm not. I'm the opposite. I'm a control freak. And I spend my entire life trying to mitigate risks. Do I put myself into situations where things can go wrong? Absolutely. I've spent my entire life trying to do first and fastest. But the way I think about risk is in a quite an analytical way. So when things have gone horribly wrong, like when I capsized in the Atlantic and spent 14 hours paddling around trying not to drown, I don't really have any trauma from that because I can rationalize what happened and what went wrong. And the behavioral change from those around me was pretty scary to see. You know, the difference between knowing what to do and doing it. As you can tell, for me, I'm fascinated by doing difficult things. When you do difficult things, there's going to be a different perception on risk based on your lived experience and what you bring to that situation. And then behavioral change under pressure is real. You know, some people just can't cope with it, but it's all about tolerance based on, have you been somewhere similar, which gives you an ability to stay present and be able to think about the situation you're in. And then the really important part is being able to say no, turn back, stop when something hasn't gone wrong because the exposure is too high. So I've turned back expedition teams. I've not done follow-on investments. I've been in lots of situations where nothing has gone wrong, but I've perceived the exposure to have gone tipped too much in the wrong direction. And I've faced situations where my entire expedition team have said to me, but nothing went wrong. And why did you make that decision? And what's very hard on a sort of human emotional level is when people don't agree with you. You know, we like to be liked and we like people to agree with us. And so leadership is in those really high exposure situations, being able to sort of step back from people's emotions and wishes and say, actually, I think we've gone to a place where the risk is too high. And that's almost harder than dealing with stuff when it goes wrong. Leadership is being able to make the hard decisions when they're unpopular. The best feedback I ever get from events, conferences, keynotes is when people come back to me, often a good time later, and say, I did this after listening to what you said. Now, I'm not a coach. I'm not a business consultant. I'm not telling people how to do their jobs better or the decisions they might make. But if through speaking about the situations I'm involved in, the teams I've worked with, it unlocks some quiet confidence. It allows people to maybe reprioritize things they were thinking of doing in their lives. It could be very simple things around what matters to them. It could be with their work. It could be with their family. It could be with their community. The best fuel to the fire for me is after I've done events, people come up to me afterwards and go, that allowed me to think about this differently. And that's the action I've taken. And thankfully, I've been doing this for long enough now where, 20, 25 years, where I know that businesses have started, people have broken records. I know a couple that even got married. And look, I can't take personal credit for any one of those things, but they've all very kindly come back to me afterwards and said, after listening to you, I did something differently, which created this change in my life. Ah, fantastic. That's the best thing about storytelling, where it's the butterfly effect. You're not telling people what to do, but you've somehow influenced their thinking around their own priorities, which unlocks some potential that was always there.